is doing something once and getting revenue from it basically forever. But what if there was never a director's cut? What if this stuff was just on the cutting room floor? The same thing happens with what we create. As creatives, doing books, making music, or having a seminar, and we have all this dialogue, but then we cut it down, like a podcast or something, we cut it down to like a half an hour thing. What happens to all that extra stuff? That bonus content can become what creates your passive income. 3 big questions you want to ask yourself before you really get into a passive income stream. Number 1 thing is, do people actually want this? You have to test it. Number 2, how hard can this be to pull off? Finally, what would be required to get this to the right people? Like, you might know that people want it. Cool, right? And you might know you can pull it off. But if you can't get it, literally get it to the people, then it doesn't really matter. We talked about quitting because he actually ended the show at the peak of Seinfelddom back in the 90s. And this is what he said to Oprah. I want to make sure I get this quote right. There's that moment when you're on the stage. Remember, he's a stand-up comedian. That's his background. There's that moment where you're on the stage and it takes years to learn it, that this is the moment. You just get off stage and then the audience gets excited. And another 5 minutes can bring them to a completely different place. Knowing when to get off the stage. There's a difference between quitting and opting out. Quitting is saying, forget this, I'm out. I don't want to do this anymore. Versus opting out is saying, I'm opting out of this and I'm moving on to something better. I want to create something better. Even though you might not have a specific idea as far as what that better is, you at least have that feeling of it. He says, I'm bad with time management, but great at attention management. If I'm choosing people on projects that matter to me, then it doesn't matter how long they take. It doesn't matter how long they take. That's the line that always gets me. I love it. I talk about the quote briefly in Built From Now and actually get much deeper into it because time, as you can tell on here, is one of the main resources discussed in Built From Now. Artist leaders multiply whatever they have to do by pi. Not food, pat in my belly, not food, but pi is in the number, 3.14 over to infinity. In other words, if you have a 20-minute thing that you need to get done, assume it's going to take just over an hour. If you have a meeting that's going to be happening and it's an all-day meeting that's in, say, another city, then assume it's going to take 3 days. That buffer makes a lot of sense. You're romanticizing a particular struggle that you went through and you're trying to support, quote unquote, someone else, and you're saying it's not that hard, get over it. That person might be in the middle of an emotional crisis. In fact, they might be coming to you for that kind of support, especially if they know that you've gone through it. Languishing is a sense of stagnation and emptiness. It feels as if you're muddying through your days, looking through your life like a foggy windshield. So it's that space between stagnation and emptiness. He says, the most compassionate people assume that other people are doing the best they can. I lived the opposite way. I assumed that people weren't doing their best, so I judged them and constantly fought being disappointed. And I think it comes down to one simple question. When you're having a difficult time with someone, business-wise or even personally, I think you need to ask yourself, do you believe this person is doing the very best that they can? Let's go ahead and break that down. I think there's 3 big lessons you can learn. Number 1, are you assuming that you're going to have more resources, more time, more energy tomorrow? Don't put the debt into your future self. Number 2, you can prevent yourself from being busy for the sake of being busy. I talk about this in the new book, Career Remix. I can't wait for y'all to get your hands on it in January of 2022, where if you actually allow yourself space, then you can strategize. If you're constantly busy, going, and being busy for the sake of busy, for the sake of pride, or maybe you feel guilt or shame whenever you take a stop, if you end up doing that, you're not able to build for this actual future. Remember, everything you say yes to now that's happening like a year from now, you're locking in your future. The question that I always ask my clients, is what you're doing sustainable? The stuff you're doing right now, is it sustainable? If we're talking 5 years from now, what you're doing today, will you be able to do that every day and still be in a sustainable place 5 years from now? For a lot of us, it's not true. This insight comes from Seth Godin over at akimbo.com. Shout out to Seth. I hope you're doing well. He has a great book called The Dip. I love this discussion with him because it gets specific. What are 2 indicators to know when to stop and when to keep going? Number 1, you need to ask yourself, has someone else done something similar to this? Doesn't have to be the same thing, but something similar. One of the things we found is that, with me coaching hundreds of folks, with me having a lot of mentorship, listening to a lot of people who have gotten really successful, they often wish that they would have quit later, not sooner, because they didn't realize the amount of resources that they needed. If other people have been on the same path, and again, if you don't know them in person, you probably know them at the library, what were the signals? This is Seth Godin's lesson. What were the signals? What were the indicators?